You came for gold. You're already gone. The air shimmers. The earth blazes. Around you, hundreds of ragged specters scratch at the gravel to the bone. No one meets your gaze. No one speaks. Only the rasp of shovels, a groan in the darkness, a stench, sweet, nauseating, like rotting meat under the sun. Your lips are cracked. Your tongue is like bark. You drink from a puddle where a dead rat floats. And that's your last sip. You thought it would be adventure, freedom, riches. In reality, you're a slave to the dirt. Dysentery will devour you faster than you find the first speck of gold. 100 times faster. No, 300. Doctors in Sacramento stopped burying the dead. They simply dragged bodies from tents and left them by the trail. 200 deaths a day. Not from bullets, from water, from food, from your own intestines, turned into a putrid mess. You didn't die from bad luck. You died by design. The system didn't want you to survive. It wanted you to pay. For a shovel, the price of a month's wages. For flour, 25 times more expensive than in San Francisco. For a gulp of clean water, the last thing you had left. The real millions weren't made by prospectors. They were made by those who sold them an illusion. Imagine, your fingers no longer feel the earth. Your eyes blur, a ringing in your ears. You're still digging, even when you fall, even when you die, in delirium, in convulsions, with your fist clenched around yellow dust. 80,000 dead in 6 years, more than in a war, and not a single hero. Only bodies in blankets, only debt, only a trap. You weren't looking for death, but it was looking for you in every sip, every step, every coin you paid for the right to die beautifully. Dead. Imagine, April 1849. You're driving a wagon from St. Louis. Your wife holds a dead child in her arms. Yesterday's fever burned him out in 6 hours. You didn't dig. No strength. Just wrapped him in a sheet and left him by the trail. Other caravans are already crushing him with their wheels. The wind steals the fabric. Sand covers his face. You don't look back. Ahead is the Mojave Desert. Behind you, 300 miles of prairies, strewn with the bones of mules and men. Someone chews a leather belt. Someone drinks urine from a flask. Someone whispers a prayer, but their voice is gone, their tongue swollen from thirst. In a prospector's diary, we read, "We are not looking for gold. We are looking for survival." But survival here is a luxury for the dead. You thought the journey was a test, but the journey is a killer. Thousands poured in through 3 routes. Across the prairies, dysentery and Comanches. Through Panama, cholera in holds where there was less than a square foot per person. Around Cape Horn, scurvy, starvation, 100-foot waves tearing ships like paper. No one built roads. No one provided water. No one buried the dead. The migration became a meat grinder. Archaeologists still find skeletons with knife marks on the bones, not from attacks, from hunger. More people died on the journey than in the diggings. The 1850 census. A cold calculation. Only 2 out of 3 made it to California. The rest, dust, bones, nameless pits. Sometimes 50 bodies in one grave, without crosses, without names. One researcher calculated, if every person who died on the way had left a stone, they could pave a road from Chicago to San Francisco. 2,000 miles of silence. You didn't even see the gold. You died dreaming of it. And now you're in California. You survived. Almost. But this isn't a land of opportunity. It's a death camp. Rivers are sewers. Hundreds of prospectors pan for gold, urinate, and bury the dead right in the water. Feces, worms, rotting corpses. You drink from this river, because there's nowhere else. In 18 hours, your intestines will turn into a putrid mess. Dysentery doesn't ask why you came, it just takes. You thought the worst was behind you, but the worst has just begun. Dead. You fill your kettle by the American River. The water is murky, but you don't see it. Your eyes are heavy with exhaustion. Next to you, a man rinses his shirt in the same spot where a corpse was buried yesterday. You don't think. You drink. In 6 hours, your intestines will start turning you inside out. In 12, dehydration will begin. In 18, convulsions. In 24, you'll be lying in the mud, clutching your stomach, your fingers no longer able to hold even a spoon. Dead. Doctors called it gold fever. Not from greed, from the symptoms. Delirious patients scratched the floor, dug the earth under their cots, muttered about nuggets. Infection burned their brains, but their bodies still remembered the goal. Some died with clumps of dirt in their fists, others with fingers fused to wooden boards, as if still churning mud in search of a gleam. This isn't a metaphor. It's a diagnosis. And it was fatal. The camp on the bank isn't a goldfield. It's a biological bomb. People drink, pan for gold, bury the dead, all in the same river. Latrines are 3 steps from the tents. Rain washes feces directly into the water source. Cholera spreads at the pace of a walking man. Dysentery, faster. Doctors in Sacramento, 5 for 20,000 people. They record the same thing. Fluid loss up to 10 liters. Death within 24 hours. No help. You're not sick. You're already a corpse that's still breathing. You thought the worst was the road, but the worst is the arrival. Even if you survive the journey, even if you didn't fall into the river with diarrhea, you still lost. Because surviving here costs more than dying. Flour, $25 a sack. A shovel, $100. A tent, $50. And the gold in your claim, $3 a week. You're not mining wealth. You're working off a debt. Every day, a new payment for the right to stay in this dump. And the longer you live, the deeper the hole. And the work? It's torture. Standing knee-deep in icy water, when even in July the temperature doesn't rise above 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Your fingers turn black by the end of the first week. Tissue rot begins in the second. But you won't quit, because debt is a chain, and it's heavier than gold. You came for freedom, and got a death camp with a river view. Dead. You arrived at the camp without tools. They told you no shovel, no digging. You found a merchant. A shovel, $50. That's like paying $30,000 today for a shovel. You paid everything you had and borrowed another $30. Now you're in debt. Every day you get up before dawn, go to the river, plunge your hands into the icy water. Your fingers go numb by noon. By evening, you can't feel your legs. But you keep going, because debt burns hotter than the cold. You're not looking for gold. You're working so you won't be killed for non-payment. And one day, you just don't wake up. Your body is found in the morning, face down in a puddle, frozen at dawn. In your pocket, 3 gold nuggets, enough to pay off your debt. But you're already dead. The economics of the gold rush were structured so that most people lost, because prices for basic goods were artificially inflated. A shovel that cost $2 in St. Louis sold for $20 or even $50. Flour, $25 a sack. A tent, $50. Gunpowder, the price of a pistol. Meanwhile, the average prospector found less gold than they spent in a week. Mining was unprofitable, but people continued, out of debt, out of desperation, out of the illusion that tomorrow would bring luck. In reality, the system worked not to extract gold, but to extract profit from hope. Monopolistic companies that controlled supplies earned more than all the prospectors combined. You weren't a miner. You were a consumer of your own demise. Strangely, those without tools survived more often. Why? Because they weren't in debt. They didn't work themselves to death trying to pay off what they owed. They could leave when they realized they had lost. Diaries from that time are full of entries. Bought a shovel, lost everything. Censuses show bankrupt prospectors who left the diggings had twice the chance of living until 1855 than those who stayed until victory. Debt. That was your real chain. Not the lack of gold. You didn't die from poverty. You died from obligations. But even if you weren't poor, Even if you were healthy and free from debt, you were still nothing. Because there was no law in the diggings, no courts, no police. There was only force. And those who had it decided who lived and who died. You could find gold today and be hanged tomorrow for being a foreigner. Because in a world without law, your life was worth nothing, especially if you didn't look like those holding the rope, especially if your skin wasn't white and your language wasn't English. Imagine, you're Chinese. You found a vein. White prospectors come at night. They beat you, rob you, hang you from the nearest tree. No one asks names. No one keeps records. In 5 years, over 1,000 Chinese were killed in California, without trial, without investigation, simply because they could. You thought gold was your enemy, but gold was silent. Only the pistols spoke. Dead. You came to the camp from another state. You don't know the locals. You just dig. But one night, 3 men burst into your tent, without a word. They drag you to the square. A crowd is already there. Someone shouts, "He stole a claim!" You didn't steal, but there's no one to prove it to. One of them, in a black hat, announces, "The regulators have passed judgment." They hoist you onto a tree. A rope around your neck. You look into the eyes of the people who shared bread with you yesterday. No one moves. A minute later, you're dead. And your claim, it's already someone else's. The wind sways your body, and below, they're already starting to divide up your tent. Your death isn't a tragedy. It's a business operation. Lawlessness in the goldfields wasn't an exception. It was the norm. California in 1849 had no government, no courts, no police, not even clear land rights. Whoever occupied a claim first owned it. But occupied meant you know how to defend it. The power vacuum was filled by regulator gangs, self-proclaimed judges who dispensed vigilante justice under the guise of order. Their decisions were final, and their motives often self-serving. Conflicts over claims were resolved not in court, but on the gallows. Judicial records from that time are full of sentences for theft, boundary disputes, or even suspicious behavior. Witnesses weren't questioned. A majority vote in the crowd was enough. In 1852, the murder rate in California was 12 times higher than it is today. 1 murder for every 100 people per year. This wasn't the Wild West. This was a war zone. Court records are full of lynchings, shootouts, stabbings, and almost no punishments, because the killer and the judge were often the same person. You weren't risking your life. You lived in a world where it was worth nothing. Archaeologists find skeletons with bullets in their skulls and rope marks on their necks, silent witnesses to the justice of the regulators. And if you thought being a white man was your ticket to survival, think again. Because if you had a different accent, different skin, a different faith, you were a target, especially if you were Chinese. Gold wasn't just wealth. It was a reason for hatred. When the gold ran out, the massacre began. You weren't a rival. You were an enemy. Your death, a way to preserve what was left. As early as 1852, California introduced a head tax on foreigners, $3 a month. That was a day's wages. Those who didn't pay disappeared. Their bodies were rarely found. You thought the law would protect you, but there was no law. There was only force, and it was always silent, dead. His name was Li Wei. He came for a dream. He got a rope. In 1852, Li Wei stood knee-deep in the icy water of the Feather River, sifting silt through a sieve made from barrel scraps, while white prospectors burned his tent 100 yards away. He knew, if he returned, they'd kill him. If he didn't return, he'd die of cold. His debt, $300, grew by 20% each month, and there was no gold in his claim, only mercury, feces, and someone else's hatred. Every evening he hid in a crevice, chewing bark to avoid screaming from hunger. One day he was caught panning for gold on an abandoned claim. The next morning, His body was found at the base of an oak tree, the rope dug into his neck, his eyes open. In his pocket, 2 specks of gold, enough to pay 2 months' tax. You thought racism was an accident? But it was a price tag. Californian authorities didn't hide their hatred, they formalized it. In the 1850s, Chinese people were forbidden to own land, to testify against whites, and in some counties, even to walk the streets after sunset. The head tax of $3 a month, that wasn't a fee for presence. It was a fee for the right to be beaten, robbed, thrown out. Archaeologists in Plumas County found Chinese camps. 73% of the tools were homemade, from rusty springs, wagon parts, mule bones. They weren't sold real shovels. Merchants just laughed. You're not a human. You're vermin. Imagine, you are Li Wei. You find a vein. An hour later, the regulators arrive. Without words, without warning. They beat you with sticks until you lose consciousness. They take everything. And when you come to and go to court, the judge looks at you and says, "You have no right to protection." This isn't a quote from a novel. This is a Sacramento record. 1853. Pogroms weren't stopped. They were encouraged. In one instance, a mob of 50 people drove out 30 Chinese, burned their property, looted their chests, and local authorities issued them a letter of thanks for cleaning up the goldfield. In 5 years, the number of Chinese in California fell from 25,000 to 8,000. The rest, either in graves or in the holds of returning ships. The system didn't want their labor. It wanted their disappearance. You thought that if you stayed silent, worked hard, didn't stand out, they'd leave you alone? But silence doesn't save you. It makes you a target. Racism here wasn't a mistake. It was a business model. And you were expendable. Dead. Dawn. Steam billows over the American River. You plunge your hands into the water. The skin on your fingers is cracked. Your nails, black. Not from dirt, from decay. You don't feel the cold. It's already inside, in your bones, in your lungs, in your eyes. Second month without a break, without dry clothes, without fire. Today, either gold or death. You dig. Your fingers cramp. You scream, but your voice is gone. You fall to your knees. Water fills your mouth. You're still digging. Because in your head, only one thought, a little more, and you're free. You thought the exhaustion was temporary. But exhaustion here is a death sentence. The water in the river is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. No gloves, no rest, no chance. Hypothermia sets in 6 hours. A cut on your palm in 2 days turns into tissue rot. A cold, in 3 days into pneumonia. And sleep? 3 hours on wet ground, in the rain, in a soaked cloak. Your body doesn't recover. It melts, like a candle in a storm. Sacramento doctors wrote, 62% of the dead didn't fall from bullets or cholera. They fell because their bodies simply stopped working. Imagine, it's you. Your fingers no longer bend. Your knees, one big bruise. And in your head, the same maniacal whisper, a little more. This is what Dr. Edward Taylor recorded in 1851. Young man, 24 years old, died in his sleep. His hands still clutched a wooden shovel. Not once. Dozens of such records. People worked until their hearts burst. Not old men, not weaklings. Men, strong, young, full of fire. And all dead by 30. Not from violence, not from epidemics. From being told, the gold is there, go and get it. Archaeologists in 2005 exhumed the graves of prospectors. 89% had microfractures in their bones. Not from blows, from daily, 12-hour torture. The body broke down from within, like a rusty mechanism. You thought you could endure it, but your body isn't steel. It's flesh, and it gives up. When the body is broken, the mind rots. Exhaustion turns into obsession. Obsession into delirium. And now you're no longer digging the earth. You're digging under your cot, in delirium, scratching the floor, swallowing dirt, whispering about nuggets. This isn't poetry. It's a diagnosis. Gold fever. That's what doctors called not greed, but the symptoms. The brain burned. The body remembered only one movement, digging, even when the heart stopped, dead. His name was Thomas. He came from Ohio with his wife and son. His wife died of dysentery a month later. Her body was thrown into a communal pit without ceremony. His son, from a cold 2 months later, because there was no doctor or medicine in the camp. Thomas was left alone. First, he dug for gold morning, noon, and night. Then, only at night, because during the day he saw faces, the faces of those he had lost. Then he stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and then he started digging in his tent, first with his fingers, then with his nails, until they broke. A doctor, called by neighbors, found him on the floor, delirious with bloody hands, whispering, "A little more, just a little more. It's here, under the boards." They took him away on a wagon to Sacramento. But there were many such cases. Too many. They were called shadow diggers. You thought you'd only go mad from hunger? But loneliness kills faster. Imagine 100 men, 3 women, and not a single friend. No family, no comfort. Only competition, violence, and emptiness. Your brain searches for meaning and finds it in gold, even when it's not there. Especially when it's not there. This isn't weakness. It's the logic of survival in a world where hope is the only currency. And when currency depreciates, the mind begins to counterfeit. This was the official diagnosis. Sacramento doctors wrote in their reports, gold rush fever, symptoms, insomnia, hallucinations, compulsive digging, even in bed, even in blankets. Some panned rags as if nuggets were hidden in the threads. Others dug holes in the floor until their fingers turned into bloody stumps. The treatment, it didn't exist. Patients were restrained or expelled. Madness was considered contagious, and it killed, slower than cholera, but more surely. From Dr. Harrison's diary, 1853. Third case this week. Man, 28 years old. Dug the earth in his bed. Died of exhaustion. Diagnosis, gold rush fever. Imagine that it's you. Your hands tremble not from cold, but from an internal rhythm. Dig, dig, dig. You no longer see the river. You see only a yellow gleam in every crack, in every stone, in every tear. Your mind, the last victim of the system. Because the system didn't want your gold. It wanted your breakdown, your debt, your silent disappearance. Dead. 7 deaths. 1 system. You thought the gold rush was chaos? It was a factory. Every factor, a cog. Migration killed on the way. Camps, in the river. Merchants, through debt. Lawlessness, through the rope. Racism, through pogroms. Labor, through tissue rot. Loneliness, through delirium. Everything worked. Precisely. Coldly. Without mercy. The system didn't want gold. It wanted your hope, to sell it back to you in the form of flour, a shovel, a tent. You came for wealth, and became fuel. Imagine, this isn't 1849. This is now. Crypto, startups, NFTs, it's all the same. Only instead of a river, Twitter. Instead of a shovel, 5K course. Instead of cholera, burnout. Instead of regulators, moderators banning those who ask, "Where's the money?" Do you still believe you'll be that 1%? The system has already calculated. You're expendable. But who survived back then? Her name was Elizabeth Haynes. She didn't dig. She didn't pray. She didn't die. She sold beans. Then flour. Then tea to the Chinese when others spat in their faces. Prices, 10 times higher than New York. But the prospectors paid. Because hunger doesn't wait. By 1853, she had a plank house, a warehouse, workers, and those who found gold, their bones lie under a layer of silt, without names, without tombstones. She wasn't looking for luck. She sold the illusion of luck and became richer than anyone. You thought the brave would get rich? No. Those who understood that gold wasn't the goal got rich. Gold was bait. Today they are called by different names: platform owners, gurus, info sellers. They don't sell shovels. They sell access to secret knowledge, subscriptions to exclusives, NFTs as a ticket to the elite. And you still pay your last penny for a chance that will never come. Because a chance is a commodity. And it's always more expensive than gold. Imagine that it's you. You stand at a crossroads. To the left, the river, icy, contaminated, with corpses underfoot. To the right, a tent. Inside, flour, a shovel, beans, and a sign. Everything 20 times more expensive. What will you choose? To dig means to believe. To trade means to know. In a system where hope is currency, it's not the dreamer who survives. It's the one who sells the dream. You're already in the game. The only question is, whose tool have you become? Dead.